we have to move quite swiftly to live coverage of the African Investment Forum, where the Akinwumi Adesina, the president of the African Development Bank, is currently speaking live from Abidjan. Let's take a listen.
Space like it's murky, it's kind of dark sometimes. There must be transparency and there must be efficiency in the use of public resources for infrastructure. Look, yesterday, over lunch, I was talking to President Nana Akufo-Addo, all the other presidents, and I was showing them a road that we had financed in Ghana, which is called the Pokuase Interchange. The Pokuase Interchange was done, financed by the African Development Bank for $94 million. And it's a 4-tier interchange. It's amazing that you can do something like that for just $94 million. I've had at least almost 8 presidents that have called me, I want to have that. And when we financed Ghana for it, that $94 million was supposed to be for a 3-tier interchange. They made it into a 4-tier interchange with the same amount of resources. So all I'm trying to say is that public financial efficiency in public financing is important. It's not just how much money you're putting into infrastructure, it's the efficiency of that expenditure to be sure that it's being used well. And therefore, I want to ask that, yes, private sector, but let's also get greater transparency and efficiency in the use for infrastructure. And just to add to what Professor Ramos said about the diversity, in addition to what he said, I think we've seen a lot of deals on transport, railway being a big one. We have in the boardroom transport on Western Railway in Kenya, Ghana, for example. Then we also have the railway that will be linking Tanzania to DRC and also to Burundi. It's a big project. We've seen a lot of deals on renewable energy. A lot of those is hydro and solar. We've seen quite a lot of these, as President Rama also said, around the gas issue, as he said, because we really think that gas is also something. We can talk about that later. But all that just to say that the diversity is there, but the investment commitments towards them very strong.
Thank you for that, Dr. Adesina. We've got 2 more questions. I'll go to the lady and the gentleman there, and then I'll go to those questions being submitted via online. So the lady, your name, your organization, and your question, please.
Hello, thank you. My name is Shiko Kimeria, and I'm the Africa editor at Quartz. So my question is really, a lot of the time when we talk about the continent, we talk about the demographic dividend. So the fact that we have all this youth, but there's also the demographic curse, which is a lot of people are still unemployed and all these things that affect them. So I wonder what message you have for this youth that really brings down, because sometimes the discussions we have can feel so theoretical and can feel so high level, but what is a message that you'd pass on to Africa's youth based on the deals that are being discussed or based on this forum? Thank you.
Right, then the gentleman there at the back.
Alain Serge, Le Matin, en Côte d'Ivoire.
Le Matin, Côte d'Ivoire. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has shambled everything, and the director, Chileno Anu, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, has acknowledged it, because he said that COVID-19 pandemic has illustrated the urgent need for Africa to overcome the challenges. Now, what has been done at that level to protect African countries from pandemics that can resurface? And where do we stand when it comes to the construction of a medical and pharmaceutical center in West Africa?
One more question, but as we do that, we'll want to prepare Tadesse to handle the question raised by the lady. And I may come back to Dr. Adesina for the question from Ivory Coast. The Ivorian gentleman there. So one more question here. Nobody's asking questions on this side. What's happening? Okay, the gentleman here, then I'll come back there.
Bonjour, ici Issouf Kamagati de Financial Afrique.
Community Financial Afrique.
J'aimerais savoir,
I would like to know
Quels sont les, ce qu'on peut retenir comme conséquences positives?
What could be the positive aspects in the various countries following the previous editions of the AIF in in face-to-face format?
So I will pass this over. Two questions in French, Dr. Deshina and Elena Bobby, so you may tackle that as well. Let's start with Tadesse on the question that the lady asked.
Thank you very much for that question. I think it would be fair to say that the issue of youth empowerment and opportunities was top of mind at this edition of the AIF. It was, in fact, a very key topic raised in the very first opening plenary at the head of state level. And you will have noticed, if you were monitoring some of the different panels, many of the different DFIs are continuing to look to expand the service provision to that particular segment of the population of the continent. So there's a great deal that's been going on. There's a lot of effort to scale up through different types of instruments, not just in the AIF meeting itself, but I think the founding members and the partners here today, all of us are seized with the issue of expanding access to financing to SMEs and to youth and to women as well. There's a number of very exciting programs that are under implementation, and we're all looking to throw our weight behind those objectives to do more. You can perhaps monitor this issue in the years to come to see how much financing has actually been made available to that specific population group. But I think all leaders and a lot of institutions are very sensitive to the need to make progress on the issue of unemployment, but also lack of livelihoods for young people, but also other population groups. It is in our corporate plan for 5 years, and I know the African Development Bank and many of other partners are very strongly focused on that segment as well.
Thank you for that, Tadesse. And let me come now to the two questions. One was about health centers, and I think Dr. Deshina wanted to touch on that before I go to Bobby Singh.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that we all learned from the COVID-19 situation is that Africa can no longer and must no longer outsource the health of its 1.4 billion people to the benevolence of others. We saw during that particular time a particular challenge, which was the rest of the world had first shots, second, third shots, booster shots, and Africa had no basic shots. Today, Africa imports 80% of all of its own pharmaceutical products. It only manufactures 1% of the vaccines on the continent. And yet, the facilities that were set up globally to help us throughout the COVID-19 actually didn't help Africa a lot. We were pretty fortunate to have escaped a lot of those challenges. So my view is that we must have health security, but based on 3 pillars. There must be investment in quality healthcare infrastructure, primary healthcare, secondary healthcare, tertiary healthcare infrastructure. Secondly, there must be investment in pharmaceutical industry so that we can actually produce a lot of our own pharmaceutical products. And third, Africa must produce the vaccines, not only for COVID, by the way. You got malaria, you got all other communicable diseases on the continent by itself. So for us as African Development Bank, we're going to be investing $3 billion in supporting Africa's pharmaceutical industry in these particular areas that I've said. But also when it comes to the issue of investing in infrastructure for health, primary, secondary, tertiary healthcare infrastructure, we plan to invest $3 billion in supporting this particular quality infrastructure for health. Now, let me say that from the Africa Investment Forum platform, you will see quite a number of projects. In fact, there is a project in Ethiopia, I think it is, that is looking at healthcare, medical centers, like health cities, We have those things that are coming a lot onto the platform for the Africa Investment Forum. We also look at the manufacturing. I think, Chinelo, it's in Kenya. I think on pharmaceutical lab was in March, looking at the manufacturing of vaccines and so on. So I think we're seeing quite a lot of that. On the question by Financial Afrique, c'est où le Financial Afrique?
Where are you? Where are you, sir? Okay, you are here. Let me respond to you in French. As you know, let me share with you 3 examples. First and foremost, there is the Cocoa Board of Ghana. Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire are the 2 countries that produce cocoa in the world, but then they export.
Juste comme ça.
But then, the most rapid way to go about it is to export raw material, because those who are rich are those who process your raw materials. So, the AIF Forum, we with the African Development Bank, with Credit Suisse, we concluded a funding of $600 million for the Cocoa Board of Ghana. And with those funds, they have started increasing their production of cocoa by 1 million additional tons. And furthermore, they have installed a stockage system to protect the quality of the cocoa beans and to avoid the need to sell this immediately after the harvest, which obviously has an impact on your capacity to manage the price. So this is something that is commendable. We are trying to emulate the same thing in Côte d'Ivoire. Secondly is for LNG, liquefied natural gas, for Mozambique. And for Mozambique, this was done thanks to the AIF platform with an amount of $24 billion.
Natural gas project for Mozambique. And we invested from the African Development Bank $400 million into that and several others. That project is going on today, and it will make Mozambique the 3rd largest exporter of liquefied natural gas in the world. And they will add about $66 billion to their revenue. So that's another huge success that we've done that's going on. The third one is coming back to the question that was raised on women, is with the Alethea Fund. That's a fund that's called the Alethea Fund. The Alethea Fund was brought to the Africa Investment Forum for $100 million. We helped them to close the financing gap completely for that. And Alethea Fund will support the businesses of women on this continent with equity investment to drive the businesses. You might have heard the president, the vice president of Liberia, when she said, for businesses of women in Africa should not always be micro. Right? We don't want women being given the little things. We want to see big things being done for women businesses. And that's why the Alethea Fund, it's there. So those are the 3 things that I want to say.
Thank you so much. And the Sonbol has raised his hand. He wants to add on to that. Sonbol, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I think just want to compliment what His Excellency President said. In the group, the Islamic Development Bank group, we also have the women and youth actually part of our priority areas, especially for the area of inclusiveness. Through the entities, we do have flagship programs for the women and youth in Africa, where we try to provide also integrated solutions for them. We found that financing alone is not going to sometimes help this, help them, a lot. But in fact, we also produce or introduce with the financing as well some solutions, like in terms of capacity building, training, and so on. In areas like in trade, we would like to see the youth also actually do business correctly and rightly, so that's why we have a lot of training programs in addition to line of finance to support their businesses. startups, also incubators. Now we have just finished, for example, two very important, programs here in Africa, in North Africa, and now the other one also in Morocco, which is the She Trade program that is really to allow and support millions of women around the continent, to do business and also to be able to cross the borders as well, go to new markets and try to sell their products. I just wanted to add that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I can see also, Musa, that question seems to have started something in you as well. You've raised your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. I would just like to add on the second question raised by the press member from Le Matin. I will address it in French regarding the pandemic. Donc, en fait, votre question était aussi de savoir ce qu'il y a.
Question, you wanted to know what additional capacity you have in West Africa, if I understood you correctly. Now, to concur with what President Adesina said, which is correct, indeed, the pandemic has shown us that it is important that we ensure sustainability in health sector, namely not to depend exclusively on the external world when it comes to the health of Africans in Africa. For West Africa, there is a center for vaccine production which has been built in Dakar, in Senegal. It was funded by our partners, the investment bank. But before curing, we also should enhance the diagnostic capacities in Africa. And these are interesting sectors for a lot of partners who are involved with other stakeholders who have expressed their interest in the health sector. And all the above is aimed at enhancing the capacities of the health sector and to ensure that the continent is independent on such an important matter.
Mohan, we've got a question here from Dinale, and he wants to look at the situation in Southern and Eastern Africa, but I know you want to restrict yourself to Southern Africa. And he says, what are some of the investments earmarked for Southern and East Africa, particularly in the travel and tourism sectors? Do we have anything along those lines of the AIF?
Sure. Obviously, as the DBSA, our focus is around Southern Africa. We operate throughout the continent. In terms of our focus has been around various infrastructure projects. So it's been about utilizing infrastructure to unlock opportunities. Some of them, for instance, have been in the airport sector as well to promote travel. We'd worked together previously to invest in airports, for instance, in Madagascar as an opportunity. So specifically, travel and tourism isn't sectors that we focus on because it's more about the infrastructure that enables that. But I think opening it up to have more private sector opportunities in infrastructure is going to also help to unlock a lot of these sectors as well.
Good. Thank you so much for that. A very quick and sharp answer. I'll come to you, Zubairu. There's a question here from Leo of African Business. And Leo is asking, what is the single biggest hurdle, therefore, to accelerate project execution and the deals flow on the continent?
Thank you. That's a very good question, because part of the challenge that we were created to solve. So the way to accelerate project execution is to develop to de-risk. By that, I mean a framework in which financial institutions like ourselves and the partners here would work with governments and sponsors to understand the project, make the developments required to reduce the risk of the project, make investments in the project ourselves, and then distribute the balance of the funding to other partners. We've done that severally, and we've tried to adapt that, to market as we go along. So one of the things that we've done is that we've started a program that we call construction finance, which is how do we ensure that we have the project built, depending on the scale of the project, in a way that you are able to appraise the cash flows of the project as opposed to look at the risk of whether the project will even happen or not. So that's something that we do, and we're replicating at scale. So again, very simple answer, develop to the risk.
Thank you so much for that, Zubairu. Dr. Adeshina, there's a question here right from the same source, that is Leo of Africa Business, saying you were vocal with the special drawing rights, reallocations. Is this completely off the table, or can we expect SDRs to be channeled through the African Development Bank to help kickstart economic growth and investments on the continent?
Yeah, well, you know, the world is going through all kinds of challenges right now. The big ones, of course, is climate change. We're all going to be in Sharm el-Sheikh talking about that just next week. There is, of course, the COVID-19 situation that we talked about. There is the war in Ukraine and what it has done in terms of energy costs, in terms of food prices, inflation. And you see the world is really reeling under inflation. And yet we still have the big financing gap for infrastructure that we just got President Somala just talk about just now. Well, the reality is there's not a whole lot of money actually on the table to support developing countries. One of the ways to actually do that is the special drawing rights that IMF has issued. IMF issued $650 billion of special drawing rights, which is the highest it has ever issued, which is good. But the issue is Africa only got $33 billion out of that $650 billion of SDRs. Now, we have been making the case at the African Development Bank, and I've been quite insistent on this, that the special drawing rights, the SDRs, should also be provided to multilateral development banks like ourselves. And the reason is simple. We work very closely with IMF on their growth and poverty reduction trust. I commend the efforts of IMF on their resilience trust that they have, which is great. However, the SDR transactions will be one-to-one transactions. If it comes to multilateral development banks like ourselves, we can actually invest the SDR money. Now, for us, because we are a triple-rated financial institution, $1 of SDR will become $4 for the countries, or for Africa. So it's a leverage of 1 to 4. So you can see, if you got $10 billion, that becomes $40 billion. If you have $20 billion, that becomes $80 billion. So that's a leveraging impact that is very, very important for the SDRs to complement the efforts of the IMF. And I do think that this is important because as we look at global challenges, we have to ask ourselves the question, what is the best way to optimize the global financial architecture? The global financial architecture starting from the IMF down to multilateral financial institutions, down to all the development finance institutions you see here. We're not looking for SDRs for ourselves. If we leverage SDR 4 times, that is money we can use to recapitalize and support the Development Bank of South Africa for the great work they are doing, the Africa Finance Corporation, Africa 50, Trade Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and others, that, really need this finance in Africa, which is part of the finance in common. So that is very, very important. Now, where are we with it? When we started this conversation, in fact, not many people really wanted to talk about it. Today, I can tell you, the entire multilateral development bank system is behind that now. We are having a lot of very positive engagements with the IMF on it. We have come up with approaches that will address the 3 fundamental challenges to it. They are technical. One is to be sure that reserve asset quality is maintained for the SDR, because that's very important. It's a reserve asset. The second one is the credit quality, and the other one, so you can't lose it, okay? And the other one is that encaishability, which is more the liquidity part. When they need it, they can get it back. And we have the solutions for that. My teams were all at the IMF. Our chief economist is here. The vice president of finance from the bank was there. And they had excellent discussions. We've had positive indications from the UK government. The UK government would provide SDRs to the African Development Bank. We are discussing with other governments We are having positive engagements with Japan on this particular issue. We're discussing with other countries as well on it. So I think I want to just thank President Macron for continuing to be the leader and the face in pushing for this rechanneling of SDRs to African countries. And African heads of state asked for $100 billion of SDRs to be rechanneled to Africa. So we are making good progress on it. I think people are realizing more that we can leverage these SDRs rather than just sitting as dormant assets on the balance sheet of central banks. Now, we're talking about it here. Infrastructure, power, water, roads, hospitals, everything. It needs money. So if we got the SDRs, $100 billion rechanneled to Africa, and some of it to multilateral developing banks like ourselves, so that we can multiply it and provide it in a capillary way to all the financial institutions here and outside, maybe we should consider modifying or changing the name of the SDR. It's not instead of a special drawing right. Why can't you call it supporting development revitalization? Because when I go around Africa and people talk to me about SDR, sometimes they think it's a political party. But that way, SDRs will work for the ordinary people that's actually there. And so we're making good progress. And I want to thank IMF for those discussions and thank the other partners, the countries that have said they are going to support us. I am quite positive that we will get there.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're drawing close to the end of the press conference, but just one quick small question for Tadesse is around trade. What needs to be done to accelerate trade across Africa? What needs to be done to make sure the African Free Continental Trade Area really moves at speed?
I'll try to keep it very simple. Trade requires multiple things to be in place. We've all been talking about infrastructure. Infrastructure is for trade. That's been under construction for several decades now. We're making more and more progress. But on the back of infrastructure, what's very important is we boost the industrialization and economic diversification thrusts that will help ensure that different countries, different regions within Africa are producing diversified goods that will be demanded across borders so that everybody's not producing tea and coffee and you expect everybody to trade in that. On the back of that, of course, is financial trade facilitation, what both ourselves and AfriExim do, as well as ITFC, which is also very committed to Africa. So there's multiple things that need to be done. It's infrastructure, it's diversification, it's industrialization, and trade facilitation through finance.
I wanted, okay, Sonbol, go on.
No, just you are very attractive topic to me, I guess. No, I think the CFTA or the African CFTA is a very important, really, tool for also to enhance integration in Africa. And once you enhance integration, trade will be coming more smoothly, and I think that we should really now do all what we can to support really the implementation of this very important agreement, which in our view will change really the face of Africa and make it more and more use of its own resources and be able to really to benefit. This is the largest agreement since the establishment of the WTO, and I think it's the most diverse as well. So let's really benefit from this, because and I'm sure that all the partners are really supporting the CFTA, and hopefully that we will see good results after the adjustment period.
Thank you. You want to add something, Dr. Deshina?
Well, I think, are you closing?
After this, we will close.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just basically to say that I am very optimistic about Africa. We are optimistic about Africa. And I just want to let you know that there are no projects today in Africa that are so big that we are afraid of doing. None. Right here is the financial muscle of financial institutions in Africa. There's no project today that can come to Africa that's bigger than our financial power to do. That's new. And that's what we call the baobab effect. The ability to do more than each one of us can do alone. We are coordinated around how we deploy our risk instruments. We are coordinated about how we do project development. We are coordinated about how we syndicate. We are coordinated about how we also do blended finance to be able to reduce the cost. We are also coordinated about how we engage with countries. This is never seen before. It's a very different way of working in the financial ecosystem for Africa. So we are not afraid of anything when it comes to Africa today. It's a more different financial ecosystem for Africa. We are confident, we are committed. And I just want to tell the investors that we will work together to make it work. Just yesterday, or was it yesterday? 2 days ago? Was it yesterday morning? Yesterday morning, we had a breakfast session with the presidents and the partners that are here. And people may think, oh, presidents are just having breakfast. No, in fact, we were busy working and thinking for ourselves, what are the bigger things that we should do together? And I think President Samala was talking about that, but I will tell you so you can hold us accountable for it. That's what they call transparency. We agreed among ourselves right here that we will push 3 big things for next year. 1, when it comes to agriculture, that we agree that we will work collectively together to support the special agro-industrial processing zones across Africa. We are doing quite a lot in that. We have a lot of work being done by ARISE that is supported by the Africa Finance Corporation. You've got Africa 50 with power to do project development and deploy finance. You've got Trade Development Bank. You have Islamic Development Bank. You have European Development Bank. You have Development Bank of South Africa and others. Everywhere we are, we want to turn around agriculture in Africa into a wealth sector. That we will have special zones that are dedicated only to agro-industrialization on the continent. So we can turn all of our rural areas away from being zones of economic misery to zones of economic prosperity. We can develop value chains that will add value to every single thing that Africa produces. We will change the face of rural Africa and turn them into new economic zones with our collective effort. We committed ourselves to that. The second thing we committed ourselves to is around the future of electric cars, I think. Yes. Yeah. We ask ourselves the question, the minerals that we need. The Africa Finance Corporation has done a brilliant work to look at the value chains for battery minerals. So whether you're talking about nickel, cobalt, or lithium ion, we then ask ourselves the question, do we want Africa to repeat the same mistakes again? Exporting these raw materials outside to the rest of the world as people drive nice cars that is actually powered by electricity, and yet the people that actually have them are literally poor. And we said, no. That what we will do is that we will put our resources together, technical resources in terms of technical assessment, our project development capacity here, our co-financing capacity here with others to be able to develop value chains for lithium-ion batteries, right? Yes. In the continent, and also attract investors to actually do manufacturing of electric cars on our continent. That's the second thing that we agreed collectively that we will do. You can begin to see how we work that's very different. The third thing we agreed that we are going to do that is different was around renewable energy. Huh? Yeah, we have the Desert to Power, which is being led by the African Development Bank and other partners, which is a $20 billion investment to help to build 10,000 megawatts of solar all across 11 countries, the Sahelian zones of Africa, that will provide electricity for 250 million people. Now, the question is this. We've already started that in Mali, in Chad, in Burkina Faso, and we continue to do that. And a great partner of ours is the Agence Française de Développement on that. But we asked ourselves yesterday the question. There is over-concentration of solar panel manufacturing in the world. So as Africa tries to maximize and optimize the renewable energy that it has, which is solar is what we have a lot of. We have 11 terawatts of solar, we have it. But if the production and the manufacturing of solar panels were to collapse for some reason, we all see what has happened in the world for COVID, we saw it happen to food, Africa will be stuck. So we decided collectively that we will support, look into designing, support, and planning for the manufacturing of polysilicons in Africa, in which Africa will begin to be a center also to manufacture its own solar panels in Africa. Now, everybody is here, so it's all in the name of transparency, nothing here. We committed ourselves to that. That's why I just want to give you the assurance that this is a different way of working together as financial institutions in Africa. We take on big things. We are not scared of big things. We will put our hands together around them, and we will continue to push to advance Africa's development with all of the resources and instruments that we can develop. So thank you very much. You can look forward to progress on this, that we will sit on this table next year and give you a report back on that. So if my partners don't mind, we stand, we hold our hands like a baobab tree and demonstrate that we're going to do that.
Okay, as they do that, members of the press, photographers.